Hi, you guys. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a good day. We're going to keep going with our poems and our Tuesdays with Morrie. So let's dive right into today's poem. It's called Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. Mary Oliver was an American poet, and she lived on Cape Cod, and she wrote dozens of books. I mean, hundreds of poems, and most of them were about nature. She could really zero in on these small moments in nature and create beautiful poetry out of those. She died a little over a year ago, I want to say, in 2019, and she was just beloved. So this is one of her most famous poems. It's called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. So that's a beautiful poem. You can go back to it again today and think about it again. It's another poem about the interconnectedness of this world and of all of us, and including nature, of course. But you can also see why so many people loved her poetry and how she could really, as I said, use that imagery from nature to kind of create these works of art. And especially when you see metaphors like that one in the middle, the clear pebbles of the rain. I mean, that's just awesome. So that's our poem for today. So we're going to go back to Morrie. And here we are back at our story. This is where we left off yesterday. We're a little over halfway through. So if you're just jumping in, feel free to go back and you can start from the beginning with us, which was a little over a week ago. Do you believe in reincarnation? I ask. Perhaps. What would you come back as? If I had my choice, a gazelle. A gazelle? Yes, so graceful, so fast. A gazelle? Morrie smiles at me. You think that's strange? I study his shrunken frame, the loose clothes, the socks-wrapped feet that rest stiffly on foam rubber cushions, unable to move, like a prisoner in leg irons. I picture a gazelle racing across the desert. No, I say, I don't think that's strange at all. The Professor, Part 2. The Morrie I knew, the Morrie so many others knew, would not have been the man he was without the years he spent working at a mental hospital just outside Washington, D.C., a place with the deceptively peaceful name of Chestnut Lodge. It was one of Morrie's first jobs after plowing through a master's degree and a PhD from the University of Chicago. Having rejected medicine, law, and business, Morrie had decided the research world would be a place where he could contribute without exploiting others. Morrie was given a grant to observe mental patients and record their treatments. While the idea seems common today, it was groundbreaking in the early 50s. Morrie saw patients who would scream all day, patients who would cry all night, patients soiling their underwear, patients refusing to eat, having to be held down, medicated, fed intravenously. One of the patients, a middle-aged woman, came out of her room every day and lay face down on the tile floor, stayed there for hours as doctors and nurses stepped around her. Morrie watched in horror. He took notes, which is what he was there to do. Every day she did the same thing, came out in the morning, lay on the floor, stayed there until the evening, talking to no one, ignored by everyone. It saddened Morrie. He began to sit on the floor with her, even lay down alongside her, trying to draw her out of her misery. Eventually, he got her to sit up and even to return to her room. What she mostly wanted, he learned, was the same thing many people want: someone to notice she was there. Morrie worked at Chestnut Lodge for 5 years. Although it wasn't encouraged, he befriended some of the patients, including a woman who joked with him about how lucky she was to be there because my husband is rich so he can afford it. Can you imagine if I had to be in one of those cheap mental hospitals? Another woman who would spit at everyone else took to Morrie and called him her friend. They talked each day, and the staff was at least encouraged that someone had gotten through to her. But one day she ran away, and Morrie was asked to help bring her back. They tracked her down in a nearby store, hiding in the back. When Morrie went in, she burned an angry look at him. "So you're one of them too," she snarled. "One of who?" "My jailers." Morrie observed that most of the patients there had been rejected and ignored in their lives, made to feel that they didn't exist. They also missed compassion, something the staff ran out of quickly. And many of these patients were well off, from rich families, so their wealth did not buy them happiness or contentment. It was a lesson he never forgot. I used to tease Morrie that he was stuck in the 60s. He would answer that the 60s weren't so bad compared to the times we lived in now. He came to Brandeis after his work in the mental health field just before the 60s began. Within a few years, the campus became a hotbed for cultural revolution: drugs, sex, race, Vietnam protests. Abby Hoffman attended Brandeis. So did Jerry Rubin and Angela Davis. Morrie had many of the radical students in his classes. That was partly because, instead of simply teaching, the sociology faculty got involved. It was fiercely anti-war, for example. When the professors learned that students who did not maintain a certain grade point average could lose their deferments and be drafted, they decided not to give any grades. When the administration said, "If you don't give these students grades, they will all fail," Morrie had a solution. "Let's give them all A's." And they did. Just as the 60s opened up the campus, it also opened up the staff in Morrie's department. From the jeans and sandals they now wore when working to their view of the classroom as a living, breathing place. They chose discussions over lectures, experience over theory. They sent students to the Deep South for civil rights projects and to the inner city for field work. They went to Washington for protest marches, and Morrie often rode the buses with his students. On one trip, he watched with gentle amusement as women in flowing skirts and love beads put flowers in soldiers' guns, then sat on the lawn, holding hands, trying to levitate the Pentagon. They didn't move it, he later recalled, but it was a nice try. One time, a group of black students took over Ford Hall on the Brandeis campus, draping it in a banner that read, "Malcolm X University." Ford Hall had chemistry labs, and some administration officials worried that these radicals were making bombs in the basement. Morrie knew better. He saw right to the core of the problem, which was human beings wanting to feel that they mattered. The standoff lasted for weeks, and it might have gone on even longer if Morrie hadn't been walking by the building when one of the protesters recognized him as a favorite teacher and yelled for him to come in through the window. An hour later, Morrie crawled out through the window with the list of what the protesters wanted. He took the list to the university president, and the situation was diffused. Morrie always made good peace. At Brandeis, he taught classes about social psychology, mental illness and health, group process. They were light on what you would now call career skills and heavy on personal development. And because of this, business and law students today might look at Morrie as foolishly naive about his contributions. How much money did his students go on to make? How many big-time cases did they win? Then again, how many business or law students ever visit their old professors once they leave? Morrie's students did that all the time, and in his final months, they came back to him, hundreds of them, from Boston, New York, California, London, and Switzerland, from corporate offices and inner-city school programs. They called, they wrote, they drove hundreds of miles for a visit, a word, a smile. "I've never had another teacher like you," they all said. As my visits with Morrie go on, I begin to read about death, how different cultures view the final passage. There is a tribe in the North American Arctic, for example, who believe that all things on earth have a soul that exists in a miniature form of the body that holds it, so that a deer has a tiny deer inside it, and a man has a tiny man inside him. When the large being dies, that tiny form lives on. It can slide into something being born nearby, or it can go to a temporary resting place in the sky, in the belly of a great feminine spirit, where it waits until the moon can send it back to earth. Sometimes, they say, the moon is so busy with the new souls of the world that it disappears from the sky. That is why we have moonless nights. But in the end, the moon always returns, as do we all. That is what they believe. The seventh Tuesday, we talk about the fear of aging. Morrie lost his battle. Someone was now wiping his behind. He faced this with typically brave acceptance. No longer able to reach behind him when he used the commode, he informed Connie of his latest limitation. "Would you be embarrassed to do it for me?" She said no. I found it typical that he asked her first. It took some getting used to, Morrie admitted, because it was, in a way, complete surrender to the disease. The most personal and basic things had now been taken from him: going to the bathroom, wiping his nose, washing his private parts. With the exception of breathing and swallowing his food, he was dependent on others for nearly everything. I asked Morrie how he managed to stay positive through that. "Mitch, it's funny," he said. "I'm an independent person, so my inclination was to fight all of this. Being helped from the car, having someone else dress me. I felt a little ashamed because our culture tells us we should be ashamed if we can't wipe our own behind. But then I figured, forget what the culture says. I have ignored the culture much of my life. I am not going to be ashamed. What's the big deal?" And you know what? The strangest thing. What's that? I began to enjoy my dependency. Now I enjoy when they turn me over on my side and rub cream on my behind so I don't get sores. Or when they wipe my brow or they massage my legs. I revel in it. I close my eyes and soak it up, and it seems very familiar to me. It's like going back to being a child again, someone to bathe you, someone to lift you, someone to wipe you. We all know how to be a child. It's inside all of us. For me, it's just remembering how to enjoy it. The truth is, when our mothers held us, rocked us, stroked our heads, none of us ever got enough of that. We all yearn in some way to return to those days when we were completely taken care of. Unconditional love, unconditional attention. Most of us didn't get enough. I know I didn't. I looked at Morrie, and I suddenly knew why he so enjoyed my leaning over and adjusting his microphone, or fussing with the pillows, or wiping his eyes. Human touch. At 78, he was giving as an adult and taking as a child. Later that day, we talked about aging, or maybe I should say the fear of aging, another of the issues on my What's Bugging My Generation list. On my ride home from the Boston airport, I had counted the billboards that featured young and beautiful people. There was a handsome young man in a cowboy hat smoking a cigarette, 2 beautiful women smiling over a shampoo bottle, a sultry-looking teenager with her jeans unsnapped, and a sexy woman in a black velvet dress next to a man in a tuxedo, the 2 of them snuggling a glass of scotch. Not once did I see anyone who would pass for over 35. I told Morrie I was already feeling over the hill, much as I tried desperately to stay on top of it. I worked out constantly, watched what I ate, checked my hairline in the mirror. I had gone from being proud to say my age, because of all I had done so young, to not bringing it up, for fear I was getting too close to 40 and, therefore, professional oblivion. Morrie had aging in better perspective. All this emphasis on youth, I don't buy it, he said. Listen, I know what a misery being young can be, so don't tell me it's so great. All these kids who came to me with their struggles, their strife, their feelings of inadequacy, their sense that life was miserable, so bad they wanted to kill themselves. And in addition to all the miseries, the young are not wise. They have very little understanding about life. Who wants to live every day when you don't know what's going on? When people are manipulating you, telling you to buy this perfume and you'll be beautiful, or this pair of jeans and you'll be sexy, and you believe them. It's such nonsense. Weren't you ever afraid to grow old? I asked. Mitch, I embrace aging. Embrace it? It's very simple. As you grow, you learn more. If you stayed at 22, you'd always be as ignorant as you were at 22. Aging is not just decay, you know. It's growth. It's more than the negative that you're going to die. It's also the positive that you understand you're going to die and that you live a better life because of it. Yes, I said, but if aging were so valuable, why do people always say, "Oh, if I were young again"? You never hear people say, "I wish I were 65. He smiled. You know what that reflects? Unsatisfied lives, unfulfilled lives, lives that haven't found meaning. Because if you've found meaning in your life, you don't want to go back. You want to go forward. You want to see more, do more. You can't wait until 65. Listen, you should know something. All younger people should know something. If you're always battling against getting older, you're always going to be unhappy because it will happen anyhow. And Mitch, he lowered his voice, the fact is, you are going to die eventually. I nodded. It won't matter what you tell yourself. I know. But hopefully, he said, not for a long, long time. He closed his eyes with a peaceful look, then asked me to adjust the pillows behind his head. His body needed constant adjustment to stay comfortable. It was propped in the chair with white pillows, yellow foam, and blue towels. At a quick glance, it seemed as if Morrie were being packed for shipping. "Thank you," he whispered as I moved the pillows. "No problem," I said. "Mitch, what are you thinking?" I paused before answering. "Okay," I said. "I'm wondering how you don't envy younger, healthy people." "Oh, I guess I do." He closed his eyes. "I envy them being able to go to the health club or go for a swim or dance, mostly for dancing. But envy comes to me, I feel it, and then I let it go. Remember what I said about detachment? Let it go. Tell yourself, that's envy. I'm going to separate from it now," and walk away. He coughed, a long, scratchy cough, and he pushed a tissue to his mouth and spit weakly into it. Sitting there, I felt so much stronger than he, ridiculously so, as if I could lift him and toss him over my shoulder like a sack of flour. I was embarrassed by this superiority because I did not feel superior to him in any other way. "How do you keep from envying what? Me?" He smiled. "Mitch, it is impossible for the old not to envy the young. But the issue is to accept who you are and revel in that. This is your time to be in your 30s. I had my time to be in my 30s, and now it is my time to be 78. You have to find what's good and true and beautiful in your life as it is now. Looking back makes you competitive, and age is not a competitive issue." He exhaled and lowered his eyes as if to watch his breath scatter into the air. "The truth is, part of me is every age. I'm a 3-year-old, I'm a 5-year-old, I'm a 37-year-old, I'm a 50-year-old. I've been through all of them, and I know what it's like. I delight in being a child when it's appropriate to be a child. I delight in being a wise old man when it's appropriate to be a wise old man. Think of all I can be. I am every age up to my own. Do you understand?" I nodded. "How can I be envious of where you are when I've been there myself?" All right, that's a good place for us to stop for today. So hope you're enjoying the story, and I hope you have a good rest of the day, and I will see you tomorrow. Look up that poem at some point today and reread it, The Wild Geese. In the meantime, make the best of it and have a good day, you guys. See you.